Hello, hopefully this is working. Hello everyone. Let me just start on Instagram too. Hello. So great to be back for another live. I'll be honest with you, I didn't know if I would be online this week. I've not been feeling amazingly well, and but fortunately I have managed to get here and to be live today. So it's good to be with you. And I have been thinking, as I have been doing the last few months, of topics I want to discuss and to talk about something before we start with questions and answers. And the topic today is actually very similar to the types of questions and answers I normally get, but I want to take a little bit of a different look at the reasons for doing this, because there's actually a bit of a story behind the topic choice of language learning today, and how on earth do we do it? Strangely, just before I started this live, I opened Twitter and I saw that one of my friends, Vladimir Skulteti, wrote, once I've learned a language to a very high level, basically after that I can learn anything else, any other language, but it just requires perseverance. And I thought that was an interesting thing for me to see just before I started this live. And in part, I agree with that statement. And in part, I think it is something that maybe needs a little bit more expansion, sort of expanding on as a concept, as an idea, because clearly there are people that study a language or two languages and then they get to another language and they feel that they stumble. And I think that in a nutshell, yes, it's to do with perseverance. You have to just go through it. How do you actually do that though? And how do you actually learn? There are a few issues that I've noticed. When you learn a language, you may be very successful in learning the first language, second language, even third or fourth languages, and it feels like it's all going really well. The thing that humans do is we have a very strange thing in forgetting what we did to do the first things that we did successfully and we did well and that we now use. And we have an amazing ability to be extremely hard on ourselves and to say very mean things to ourselves, and to basically be the worst haters that we could possibly be online, but to ourselves. And this all has an impact on our learning ability. And I mean, we always talk about, when you learn a language, know your goals, know what you're learning it for, make a plan, decide what you want to do in the first week, months. And these are the kinds of things we've been talking about with my Korean study. But actually, when we've done it once or you've done it a second time, and you forget how much actual time and effort and energy went into learning the first language, we can almost think that we get to the next one and we spend a month, 2 months, 3 months, and we're still not at the level we expect we should be at, and we lose faith and we lose hope, and we kind of start telling ourselves that we're stupid, or that we should definitely know this by now, and why are we forgetting all of these words, and why don't we get the grammar straight away, and why don't we do this and why don't we do that? And that's all very, very understandable, but it's not very fair. We're not very fair on ourselves. And I was thinking, because I'm going through this whole process of learning Korean, right? And in learning Korean, I've had a few stumbling blocks that I've mentioned on the way. So one of them was having a particularly awful month and plus worth of stuff to go through, which really took me off track. And then sort of finding my feet again, and then on Clubhouse finding a group of people to study with, and that's been really good. And I think that kind of community thing is really good. And I talked about community last week as well, about how I think community is a good thing. And I was in one of my lessons the other day, and the teacher said to the students, "Stop writing and just listen to me." And I was quite interested in why on earth the teacher was saying this to the student. And it was it was funny because she said, whilst you're writing, you're not listening to what I'm saying, and therefore you're going to miss something, or you're going to miss the point of what I'm actually saying. And I thought that's quite right and quite true, in that we do tend to do that, right? We do tend to have this rushing to do the next thing because we're in a rush to go forward, to get as far as we possibly can. Maybe there are other things that we're doing as well that we want to also check all of our social media channels. We get distracted with 100 million things, and these are all things that we do that take us away from the actual learning itself. And I was thinking about what she said, and she also sort of went on to say, when you write everything down, why are you writing it? Is it because you use a piece of paper as your memory? So therefore, once it's already logged and written here, that's it. You can kind of just throw it to the side, and you don't need to worry about it anymore, because now it's logged. You've written it down, and you've sort of been there. You've been present. You've written it down, and you've thrown it to one side, and it's gone with your other notes and all of your notes on grammar, all of your vocabulary. But do you actually do anything with that? And I think sometimes it's true that we don't do very much with that. I've got books and books and books and books of things that I filled in from language study, and when I look through them, I can't even remember reading those words. And I think actually the teacher had a point. Are we really present? And if we're writing everything down, we might be missing actually a word or an explanation that really we do need to know. And when it comes to language, actually you need to have it in your head. I mean, you can have as many notes as you want, but we don't communicate in sort of most circumstances with a piece of paper with lots of words on and notes and all that kind of stuff. That's not how language works, right? Language is something we do spontaneously usually, unless you're sort of getting prepared for an exam. You do it in a spontaneous way, and you have to react and interact, and you have to use the vocabulary and use the grammar in a sort of in a coherent way that will help you to get your point across. And that's kind of the business of language learning. And so my teacher, even though when I first heard her say that and asked somebody not to sort of write, my first initial reaction was kind of, oh no. But actually, when I thought about it, she's completely right. I mean, if we're just writing everything down without considering or logging it and cataloging it, because it's kind of a collection of things that we want to keep on a shelf to gather dust and we don't really want to use it, there isn't really much point in it, is there? I mean, presumably most of us want to actually learn the language to actually learn the language. We don't go through the sort of the motions of learning vocabulary and grammar just to sort of put it on a shelf to gather dust. We don't do that. We do it because we actually want to speak it and use it and understand it. And I was thinking, this leads me to the other problem that we have, right, as language learners. And I have this problem myself from time to time. I will end up with sort of even these. I made these flashcards, right, for Korean. I made them because my teacher said to me one week, you have to learn this vocabulary, right, so that we can use it in class. I'm like, well, absolutely. And he had a point, because he said this is what he says. And I joined these two pieces of advice together, because it's all well and good sort of going through things, but if you're not actually learning stuff, you're not studying it, you're not hearing it, you're not having any contact with the language, yeah, you can forget it, you can get it wrong, but if you're not making any effort whatsoever to do that, yeah, you're actually learning the language, or are you just collecting notes and collecting books and collecting all of collecting all this stuff that actually you give yourself permission by writing on a piece of paper to then throw the vocabulary and the grammar away and say, okay, look, I've that's my brain now, it's gone. And it's kind of it's gone. And I think that both of my teachers had points to make, and I thought they were very valid points. And so when I think back to the tweet that that Vlad put out today, and saying, you know, once you've learned a language, that's it. You've kind of cracked a code, and you can do that. I agree to the point that I think that we've got it all in us to be able to learn a language, for sure. Absolutely. I've no doubt that we can all do it. Where I think there's a little bit of a gray area is, can we go back to understand how long it actually took us to learn that first language, how long it took us to get the vocabulary down, how long it took us to go through the grammar, practice it, get it wrong, then get it right, then get it wrong again, then maybe get it right again, until it became automatic. How long did it take us to get to these different levels that we think we're going to all of a sudden, by some sort of miracle, attain or achieve within a matter of weeks or months or days? Sometimes people you hear saying that they learn a language in a day or 2 days or 5 days or 7 days or a week or 3 weeks or whatever, but a very short amount of time. Where do we actually just to take a break, look back, consider what we're doing? And it's not a case of racing through a course, writing down every single piece of vocabulary and every single piece of grammar that we come across to throw to one side, and then just have kind of a vague recollection in our brains of a distant memory of something we once covered on a course or in a class or with a teacher or with a friend. The point is that we have the repetition over and over again until it becomes automatic. And that, I think, is how we learn a language. I hope you enjoyed my story and my thoughts on this. And I think that doing all these things, writing things and getting that muscle memory, all these types of advice, I'm not sort of poo-pooing that and saying it's not useful. I think that everything we do is useful, but it's also useful to be very conscious of the fact that we don't do that and then think we should know it. It needs to be repeated over and over and over and over and over again. It's not so simple for us to just write things out. I've written and read some Korean words, I don't even know how many times, and then what I'll do, like just sort of from my lessons, right? So anybody who speaks Korean out there, you will get this. I hope. Otherwise, it's just me. But you'll see a verb in Korean. Okay, you'll see a verb. So I'm going to take a verb now and just give you an idea of like, okay, let me see. So I will see a verb like, okay, I'm going to say boda. I'm not getting the one that I've had on here, boda, which is the verb to see, or you can use it to read as well in Korean. And the way to say I see or I read or I watch, you can use it for TV, is 보여. And the weird thing that I was finding was that I would learn this infinitive form, this standard form of like to watch or to read or to see, and then I'd learn how to actually conjugate it. And I do that with so many verbs that I wouldn't see the infinitive again for a long time. And I was finding that I was asking for a translation or to understand the infinitive again and again and again, because what I'd done is I'd written it down on a piece of paper and write, oh yeah, boda, boda, boda. And then I put like to watch, to look, and then I just threw it to the side. And then I learned poyo. And because I kept getting it wrong 100 times, I got it wrong. And then eventually I realized, yeah, but what am I actually doing with the infinitives now? What have I done with all those notes? And then that's when I sort of, the penny dropped. Yes, I know how to learn languages, but was I actually practicing the art of learning languages? Sometimes even when you've done it many, many times, you sort of, you go off into a sort of a world of your own, or you get distracted by something else, and you actually need to sit and study. You actually need to do it. It's not going to go in by osmosis. So yeah, that's my story. That's kind of what I've been contemplating this week, and I'm going to write a blog about it as well to go with this video, and sort of hopefully answer some of your questions and give you some insights into what it's like for me learning languages. And also I hope you can also empathize with this sort of problem, this issue with language learning that I think is a lot more prevalent in our day-to-day life than we actually imagine. And I think that a lot of us have this kind of issue. So I hope that it was useful, and I will now have a look to see if you have any questions for me. So I can see some nice hellos and saluts and some bonjours and some hello, and let me see. Okay, off. Okay, I'm going to just check now. Hello. Okay. Great to see you all joining. So thank you, first of all, for coming. I really appreciate your support and for coming to sort of listen to me and also to ask questions and interact. I really appreciate that. Okay, so I have, it's been the same with guitar. Okay, so Dan's saying on YouTube, it's been the same with guitar and on how to play the piano when he was, so you learned to play the piano when he was young, and then learning the guitar, he kept failing at it, or feeling that he was failing at it. Because you forget how much work and time that went in. I'm so glad that you can make that comparison with other things. I think it's true for a lot of things in life that we do this. We don't vastly underestimate the work that we put in. So yeah, brilliant that you do that, and I hope that your guitar playing gets better, or that you already have overcome that. So Timothy says, bist du Mitglied von irgendwelchen Vereinigungen für Mehrsprachige? Na, eigentlich nicht, nein. Es gibt ja Hypia, aber nee, ich mache eigentlich nicht mit im Moment. Ab und zu, wenn sie was über Zoom organisieren, dann, ich habe zweimal, denke ich mal, so mitgemacht, also einfach Gespräche auf verschiedenen Sprachen geführt, aber das war alles. Ich bin eigentlich kein Mitglied, nein. Okay, Netboy, Pozdraviznisha. Do you speak the Romani language? A little bit. I've studied a little bit of Romani, but I don't speak it very well. Dardas Romanes. Let me see. Hey, I'm hoping to go to Sweden and France for 6 months each in the future. It would be a good workaway cultural experience. How much progress do you think I could make in that time? So Ben Svenska really depends what you do and how much time you put into it. And but 6 months in each of those countries is quite a lot of time. So you could make quite good headway if you study well. You can make quite good headway in both languages. I'd say that you probably, if you studied full time in those countries and you use the language a lot, you could probably get to a B1-ish, possibly even to a B2 level, depending on what you do. 6 months in both countries. If you speak English already as well, is a big help, because French and Swedish are relatively simple simple in the sense that we have a lot of shared vocabulary, so you don't have to learn as much vocabulary actively as you would in, say, a language that's unrelated. So that will help. Swedish grammar is fairly straightforward, and French grammar is a little bit tricky to write, so maybe your written French might not be as good as your spoken French, but because that just takes time. It depends on how you learn as well. I mean, it's super difficult to say. Hola, hello, dia noite, dia noite, Brian. Konstatatu. Lärde fremdeles norsk? Ja, jeg har lært norsk. Ja, det var for en projekt. Jeg var i Norge. Jeg reiste der i Norge i en sommer. Jeg var i Svalbard og Oslo. Jeg har venner der i Oslo. Og ja, jeg hadde en venn fra Svalbard like, så jeg var der. Og jeg snakker svensk. For meg var det ikke så svært å lære seg norsk. Men jeg snakker ikke så vel nå. Det er ok, men det er så for svensk, det er det. Dag. Jeg skal språken litt favoritt for den, og jeg håper norsk. Ja, for meg, jag snackar bättre svensk, men för mig är det inte så favoritspråk. Men favoritspråken så jag kan tala mycket bättre svenska än så jag pratar norska till exempel, men Men det betyder inte att jag har så jag pratar gärna svenska bara för att jag kan uttrycka mig mycket bättre på svenska. Jag kan till exempel på norska eller danska eller någonting. Men jag tycker om alla skandinaviska språk. I've just started learning Georgian. That's an interesting challenge. It definitely is, Inga. It definitely is. Qual língua você gosta mais de falar? Todas as línguas. Então, para mim, é uma coisa que é uma beleza falar uma outra língua. Então, agora estou fazendo um curso de cornolês, que é a língua de Cornwall, e também de gaélico de Escócia. Então, são as duas línguas que eu faço agora um curso para elas. E também tenho, também naturalmente, com o coreano. Eu gostaria de falar bem coreano um dia, mas depende muito do tempo que eu tenho, depende muito também das possibilidades para usar a língua. Porque uma língua como o coreano, por exemplo, é uma língua que não tenho aqui. Na minha região do mundo, então não temos coreanos, absolutamente, então isso é um pouco difícil para a vida normal, ao voltar à vida normal, cotidiana, com a escola, com o trabalho, com tudo, é um pouco mais difícil estudar coreano na casa, porque fora da casa eu falo mais línguas como a língua turca, albanês, também sério, grego, línguas assim, porque são as línguas da região. Então, temos mais tendência a voltar para os países vizinhos de aqui. Então, isso. Det var väldigt svensk, men det var förståeligt. Tack, Inger. Okay. How would you organize? Okay, you're learning Russian, fantastic. Nederlands, yeah, goed. How would you organize the lessons for the tutor? I go through a course and we practice whatever's in the course. And some of the teachers that I have are very organized and they have their own lesson plans as well, which is cool. So I actually have a lesson for Maltese, which I enjoyed just dipping into Maltese from time to time, and my teacher's very good at organizing things. My Indonesian teacher is on a break at the moment to write her dissertation, but she is also extremely organized and has great lesson plans, and I just let her take control. Those two teachers, they're both extremely good and extremely disciplined. Some teachers I think are good, but they possibly need, I feel I need to lead more. It depends on, really for me, on the language that I'm studying. So if it's a language I know is close to a language I already speak, I may lead a bit more or prescribe what I think will work better, knowing what I know. So it really depends on the teacher. But yeah, we like to go over things and do as much as I possibly can. For Korean, my teacher's also going through a book, and I've not stopped him. I've just let him carry on with the book that he wants to use because I wasn't using it, and it's actually pretty good. It's a grammar book. We're just going through the grammar of Korean, and that's probably actually what I need from him. What I don't need is kind of to sort of go through more and more words, because my study group goes through a lot of words and vocabulary and dialogues and stuff. So with him, it's quite good. And this grammar actually has dialogues in it as well. So a lot of times we have lessons, I find that there's a good crossover of vocabulary. Where am I from? I'm from the United Kingdom originally, but I live in the Balkans. Let me see. Okay. Gracias. De nada. Muchas gracias a ti. Let me see. I'm trying to see I don't see many questions here on Instagram. It's a little bit small as well, but if you do have a question, please feel free to write it again if I don't reply. I can't see anything except people coming in and out. So I will come back and let me see. I can see more questions here on YouTube though. So let me see. I'm learning Russian. I have different methods and books to learn the language. I'm using them together. Is it better to stick to one book method only? Alphonse, actually, it depends on you. It depends how much it distracts you from going from one book to another. I say it's good to go as far as it goes. The thing is, some books will work for a certain amount of time, and then you may want to go to another type of book, another style. I've got to be honest with you, with Russian, actually, I've been using this app recently called Speakly, and they have a really great way of teaching languages. Actually, probably one of the better apps I've seen for language learning. And Lindy made a video about it. She made a list of apps on Twitter, and I wrote Speakly is great as well. And she said, yeah, I know, I'm using it, but then she brought out a video talking about it. So check out Lindy's video to sort of go through it. But I've been playing with it for a few weeks. Well, maybe actually more like a month or so now, with Estonian and Finnish, and I find it actually really good. I remember the words in Estonian fairly well, just by doing it. It's very natural. They use words and vocabulary and grammar that you're likely to hear and to see and to use and to need. No strange words to do with sort of, I don't know, my grandma's a goat, but I go to the shops with an owl every week and we buy cabbages or something strange like that you get in some apps. Okay. But yes, if you can definitely use different books. It's not the end of the world to do that. Just don't make it so many that you end up getting, you don't know where to go. Because if too much choice can be confusing, but a little bit of variation can be good, if that makes sense. Okay, let me see. Richard, have you studied any Arabic? Yes, I have, 3 times in fact, because I struggle immensely with the sounds. How did you overcome this? Yeah, so the sounds of Arabic are modern standard Arabic, are fairly tough in the beginning. I think as somebody who speaks obviously English, we have this, so we have those sounds naturally. I don't know if you have those easily from the languages you speak, Jonas. That helps, and the z and the these sounds we have in English, of course, and in my dialect of English we have the ch sound, so that helps. Obviously with Welsh we have sounds as well that are a bit different to standard English, and we have the rolled you get the rolled R. So those are sounds I could make. The sounds I found a little bit difficult were the ein, making the difference between an ein and ein, and if I found that fairly difficult, and practice really, and then when you have to say them in a sentence or in a word, that's when it sort of gets a little bit difficult, because you kind of have to you almost force the sound, and it sounds overdone, I guess. But it gets more normal. The more you practice, the more normal it becomes. So yeah, but I've tried it 3 times, and for very specific reasons. Actually, I was supposed to go and work in Lebanon, but it didn't happen, and because war broke out, and then I was supposed to go to study at university in Damascus, and the university didn't reply in time, so I didn't get to go. So I studied to go to that. And then the 3rd time I started studying through university in Sweden, and I was studying at Dalarna University. I did a semester of it, thinking I was going to get some experience with the refugees coming through, and didn't. So again, stopped. So because I don't have any, I don't have any way, unfortunately, of using it very easily. It's not a language that's spoken readily here, although we do have a lot of Arabic words through Turkish. So, David, you're using Link. Yeah, Link's good. I like Link as well. Brian, do you think it's a good idea to study phonetics or just to imitate native speakers? So I think maybe learning the IPA and how it works can be useful, the International Phonetic Alphabet, because it will help you to sort of get it. And there are websites where you can actually click on the different sounds, and then when you look at dictionaries, very often they'll use the IPA to show you how it should be pronounced, and that will help. Always listening very attentively and actively to people who speak the language already is useful, because it helps you to sort of hear how they use it, and I think that is always a good thing to do. So I would say the two things are not mutually exclusive. Just try whatever works for you, but I would say it's definitely worth doing the IPA. We learned it at school, actually, in the UK. I had to learn the IPA for that, for my studies of English. Inga, I read that you're learning Estonian with Speakly. Okay, how's that going? I've started as well. I'm really liking the app so far. I like that they have grammar and longer text. Yeah, I do too, Inga. I think they're really good. Yeah, it's a nice language. I like Estonian. I've always liked the sound of Estonian, so it's a lot of fun. I find that it's quite an intuitive app. There are certain things I get wrong again and again and again and again, but hey, that's part of language learning, right? So it's not the end of the world. Eventually I'll get there. But I think it was probably a bit of a mistake reviewing my Finnish at the same time, because the two languages are fairly similar in a lot of ways. So I probably should just concentrate on doing the Estonian side first and worry about getting back to Finnish another time. It's just, it was there, so I was like, language problems, polyglot problems. Hola, ¿cómo están? Muy bien, Richard. I hope you're well. Okay, using Rosetta Stone for Learn Russian. Can you recommend any ways to make the learning process smoother? I think you are answering. I don't know. I don't use Rosetta Stone. I have done in the past when I was very, very young, but I didn't find it particularly helpful in my studies for the way I learn, because it negated the fact that I can read and write and understand grammar already, and I found it very, very slow going. So I got bored very quickly and turned it off. And I used somebody else's, so I fortunately didn't have to pay for it. But I don't know if it's improved. I've not used it as I say, that was a long time ago. They may have updated and upgraded what they do. How are you finding it, Matthew? I think that it's probably good to actually have texts in the language, because just sort of solitary words I find just a little bit too random. I need something to put them together, some meat, sort of I need something really to sort of get it working. Jonas is saying yes. It's literally impossible for me as a Norwegian speaker. You're right. Yeah, you'll be fine, Jonas. Honestly, it takes time. It just takes time. So Inga, you're doing Finnish and Estonian at the same time as well. I have the same disease as you. Absolutely, Inga. There's no help. There's no hope. Unfortunately, that's just it. But yeah, doing both of them at the same time is probably, no, not probably, definitely not the best idea. And I may take my own advice soon. I don't know. At the moment, I'm just sort of playing with it. But because I've done Finnish before, I did it from the beginning instead of doing the test, because in Speakly you can test yourself and see where you're up to. So I tested myself in Russian, and it put me at sort of advanced intermediate or something. I don't know. But for Finnish, I didn't test myself, although I should have done really, because I have studied Finnish. I studied at university in Helsinki, and I've been through 2.5 books out of a book course of 4 with the Suomen Mestari. So I should, in theory, I got to sort of A2-ish level in Finnish, but I started from the beginning because I thought I'd be very confusing to do more advanced stuff in Finnish and then start Estonian. But as it is, I found it very confusing anyway, doing both. Definitely not something I would advise you to do. Okay, I'm trying to see if there are any other questions here that I can see in the chat. Okay, so I see on Facebook, Alexander's writing, what's the first language you learned? It's the first language I learned after, obviously English is the very first language I learned. And then it was French that I really learned to speak well. And I was quite young when I started learning French. So yeah, there we go. French was the first one, I guess. Let me see. That's interesting. So I have a comment here. I have one comment I've just seen asking me just to speak English and not to speak other languages. We talked about last week, multilingualism through the medium of English, which is a funny thing. I don't mind speaking English because it's my language, and yeah, I quite like English. I mean, I know that's probably almost heresy for people in the language learning community for a native English speaker to say that they like English. I actually do. I think English is a really beautiful language, and I like what we can do with it. So I don't have any problems with speaking the language at all. In fact, I studied English as well. So yeah, I like it. But at the same time, I do believe that yeah, I like multiple languages. So it's nice to have more than just one language in these live chats, I think, than in just English. Cześć, cześć Wojtek, jak się masz? Wszystko w porządku? Okay, let me see. Can you talk about some funny quirks of a language you've heard recently? For example, weird sayings in French. Oh, okay. So yeah, actually I can. I'm going to try see if I can remember now these words. I famously wrote them down as I was talking about. I wrote some of them down, but I haven't committed them fully to memory yet. Yeah, so I found I've been learning Cornish, and Cornish is kind of quite similar to Welsh. So I found it fairly okay to pick up vocabulary. But one weird thing today I didn't realize was that the word for cold in Welsh is oer in Welsh, and it's oer in Cornish. But oer is actually colder than just oer. Oer, mein oer heddiw is in Welsh. It's cold today, but in Cornish, oer is like freezing cold. And then they have iein, which sounds like ya, which is like ice. And that's actually not as cold as or, which I found really bizarre that they'd have it the other way around to Welsh with these meanings. And yeah, so there are some weird things like that I've come across that I find quite bizarre. And in terms of sort of expressions, I'm trying to think, I can't think off the top of my head of funny expression, like as in funny haha, not funny peculiar, funny weird. I mean, we do have a lot of very funny expressions in Macedonian that when I first arrived and heard the language and then heard what they said, I thought it was hilarious. So things like when a child is born, people will say "pupupu," that's to ward off the evil spirits. "Pupupu, daya or go serat kokoshkite." It means that may hens poo on him or her, the child. They have the two genders for the child. They don't have another gender that they use. That's what they use typically, and that I found really funny, because why would you wish that hens pooed on a child? Found it very strange, and that's probably one of the funniest ones that I can think of right now. But there are probably a lot of others. Give me time, I'll come back to you if I think of any others. Okay, could you please answer my question about vocabulary? Could you repeat it, please? Because all I see is that. Could you answer my question about vocabulary? And let me see, I unfortunately can't scroll through so easily. What do you think about things like Chomsky's idea of a universal grammar that is common to all human languages? I mean, I kind of have to bow down to linguists really on this, because I'm not a linguist in the sense that I've not studied linguistics in great enough depth, and I'm not an authority to speak on the topic. I tend not to. I can have ideas and thoughts, but on that particular topic, I would rather be a listener and question rather than give thoughts and ideas publicly at this stage in my life, this stage of my development on that topic. I've heard about it, of course, but I wouldn't sort of say very much more than that at this moment. I'm a great believer in sort of knowing what you're talking about and then talking. Yeah, so yeah, there we go. There's enough misinformation out there with fake news nowadays without me adding to it. Where was Greek in your list of languages? Was it just a hobby for holidays? Craig, it kind of was, actually. Greek was always a hobby language, but a language that, the proximity to Greece for me I mean, it's a couple of hours down the road in the car. So pandemics aside, normally I would go to Greece 5 or 6 times a year. I mean, it's a day trip. It's no crazy place to go. You know what I mean? It's not expensive to go there. It's just driving down the road, and I'd use it there fairly often. So kind of my Greek has always stayed at this really weird sort of A2 B1 level for a long time, and I decided when we went into the pandemic that I would actually follow the B1 course and just make sure that I filled in any holes in my Greek and I went through it. So yeah, I feel fairly confident saying things in Greek, but so I guess it's more than just very basic tourist Greek now. Certainly, when I go to Greece, people speak to me in Greek. I don't get people speaking back to me in English or anything. They speak to me in Greek, and they seem very happy when I speak. So I guess it's okay. It's a lot of fun. I like it. Do you learn most about languages through English, or do you use textbooks in other languages as well? You learn Japanese and Chinese through Indonesian, Finnish in Hungary with Hungarian books. Wow, Inga. Yeah, I do actually use other languages, not just English. Not every language has great resources in English. So I've studied languages through university, obviously. So I've done languages just through the language. So Czech was in through Czech, Turkish was through Turkish, some explanations of grammar in Macedonian, Albanian mainly through Macedonian. I did Greek initially through Dutch. I did Georgian, Arabic, Japanese, Chinese, and Russian partly as well through Swedish, because I was at university in Sweden, and then I did some German through Spanish years ago, and I've done a lot of languages through French, an awful lot because of Assimil and because I studied in France as well. Italian through Italian, Italian through French, Portuguese through French, Spanish through French. I had to do interpret. So I did a course at university in France of interpreting, and I had to interpret from Spanish to French and French back to Spanish. So that was pretty crazy. And then, yeah, I mean, whatever works really. So I've also, I've got books in Russian. I've got books in a number of languages that I can read fairly well. So yeah, whatever I find, I'm happy to use. I've got a couple as well in Serbian, and I feel quite happy reading any of those. To be honest, to learn a language, none of them are a big challenge to do that. But I'll go with whatever appeals to me. The language isn't necessarily the deciding factor, if that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So I can see here. Okay, Carlos. Greetings from Manhattan. Thank you for streamings. You always learn something new. Thank you, Carlos. Muchas gracias. I see. Okay, that's quite funny. Okay, Greek expression. Let me see. A Greek expression in English is to eat the letters. Yes. Yes, linguists are not necessarily polyglots and vice versa. Yeah, I thank you for agreeing with me there, Carlos. Yeah, I totally am not. I don't kind of like going down that rabbit hole of being a linguist, to be honest. I'm not. I know that people talk about people being linguists as into languages, and I get it, but I think in this environment, this isn't kind of a colloquial talk about language learning. This is a little bit more structured, and I think I'm talking in the field of languages, right? So I can't use the label linguist in this kind of setting. I think it's disingenuous, and would be for me to do that. So, yeah, absolutely. Okay. I know some fraud people who have created the weirdest methods for learning languages. Okay, can you please talk about decent ways of learning and memorizing vocabulary so I can share it on my socials? Yeah, the first part of the video actually, today was talking all about language learning. So please do go back and read through that, and or listen to it. Sorry, and you will see what my thoughts are on learning, and context is king is my kind of overriding thought. Yeah, we do have an expression, Craig. Yeah, to eat our words, absolutely. In what did you get your degree? So my first degree is in combined languages, which is French, Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese. They're the languages I chose for my degree. I also sat in on the Scandinavian Studies degree. So I studied Swedish and Old Icelandic, and then I did an advanced diploma in Czech studies at Charles University. So they're my kind of main languages that I studied for a full course. I did credits at university in Sweden, and again also in other countries like Iceland and in France and in Spain and in Italy, and I'm going to miss some countries now, and in Finland as well. I've done a number of like university courses in a number of languages. So yeah, quite a few different things, but my main degree is called combined languages. Yeah. How about some life advice outside of languages? Something random. I'd like to hear life advice. Wow, I feel like I need to grow a longer beard to give you life advice. Maybe sort of a Lord of the Rings thing going on there or something. I don't know. I'll have a think, Ben, and come back to you on that. My main piece of advice that I sort of stick by actually is to try and be understanding and treat people as you want to be treated yourself. And I think that piece of advice generally in life is quite nice. Sort of taking a bit of a deep breath and maybe asking a question instead of attacking. I think they're always nice things. It's not always easy, I get it, but I think if we have more understanding and compassion in the world, and we try and understand people's points of views when they differ to ours, even, I think it's interesting to get different perspectives and to sort of to be understanding. We never know where people belong and where they come from and what their history is, and people are multifaceted. I've had people say the strangest of things and make the strangest of judgments on me, and they sort of have to sort of just sort of I'm always amazed because you never know who you're talking to and what they've been through. So understanding goes a long way. Okay. The fact that you exist is a miracle. Can you reply in Arabic? What? I don't know. So the fact I exist is a miracle. In Arabic, no, I can't reply. It wouldn't be a very interesting answer anyway. Okay. Shall you please tell me about how to improve fluency in a language without getting any language certification in order to get a job? Yeah, I think that it's kind of what I was talking about at the start of the video. So sort of, I would look through that, and there's not an easy, quick answer to that question. It's doing it, listening to the language, reading the language, and studying regularly. That is the key. Okay, quick study question. While I'm memorizing vocab or learning verbs or something, would you recommend I listen to a podcast at the same time, or would that would just be distracting? Depends what you're listening to, depends how interested you are in what you're listening to and what the vocab is. Sometimes some people need to do two things at once for their brains to just even cope with doing one of them. I often have that kind of thing where if I just have one thing that I'm doing, my brain just starts wandering and I start thinking of lots of other things. So I need to have something happening as well. And yeah, I find doing a couple of things at the same time helpful for me. But it's not for everyone. Sometimes I do need to just peace and quiet. It depends on the task and what I've got to do. I find repetition is the most important thing, though. Okay. What's my thoughts on Esperanto? Okay. And using it instead of English as an international language. Jonas, I like Esperanto. I've studied it. I've got friends who speak Esperanto, and I gladly use it with them when I get the chance. Don't really get to use it here in my day-to-day life because we don't have any kind of Esperanto groups or clubs or anything like that. But whether or not it would take over English as an international language, I think it's highly unlikely at this point. If I were a betting man, I would say it's highly unlikely. That doesn't mean it's not worth studying. It's a lot of fun. Like any language, it's always nice to speak in another language, right? It's a language in its own right, and it's nice. So, but yeah, I don't think it's likely to overtake English to become a truly international language that people use on a daily basis all over the world, unless a lot of governments agree to implement it as such. Which, who knows? If people lobby governments through that kind of democratic processes that exist around the world, that could possibly happen at some stage. I know that schools have tested out using Esperanto, and they've sort of taught it in certain places. I know in the UK that's happened, and they've actually found that children outperform children that do 2 years of French, and then children who do 1 year of Esperanto and then 1 year of French will actually outperform the children that have done just 2 years of French. They'll beat them at French, basically. They'll be better at French than the other children who have just done 2 years of French. It's because the grammar of Esperanto, and you can start speaking it very quickly. So it helps the brain to imagine what it's like speaking a language, especially if you're learning your very first language. Salut, je voulais te dire que je te regarde depuis un bout du Québec, Canada. Merci, c'est gentil. Salut, ça va bien? Merci pour toutes les belles vidéos. Merci, merci, c'est très gentil, Joe. J'apprends énormément avec toi. Ok, merci. À plus. C'est gentil. Okay. Let me see. Understanding goes a long way. Thank you, Marcus. You're that kind of person, I know. So I know that will resonate with you. Have you mastered Tokipona? Mi toki ala toki Tokipona. Tokipona. Is that right? I don't speak Tokipona. I studied it for a while because I thought it was fun, but yeah. Yeah, so there we go. But I haven't mastered it, no. Thanks, Abaid. Have a look at that and see what you think. Have you ever studied token languages? For like Lord of the Rings type stuff? No, I haven't. I haven't studied them, no. I loved the sound of Elvish, though, in the film. It sounded really cool. Do you know any of the conlangs, or have you ever thought of creating one? I never really thought of creating one, but I've got the Dothraki book up here somewhere. I was given that as a present, I think. And when we had the Polyglot conference in New York, we actually had a talk on conlangs, and I found them quite interesting. It's interesting when people come up with conlangs. I think it's quite a fun thing to do. But no, I've only really Esperanto and italki. I've really only studied. But I wouldn't rule out learning another one at some point. Thank you, Bear. Okay, thank you. You've purchased the parallel textbook for French. How can I use it most effectively? Should I note down new words and highlight? Ben, if you're using the, I guess you're talking about the one Ollie and I worked on. I would say a good way to use it is actually listening to it and doing a few different things with it. So reading it out is good. If you've got the audio, listen to the audio as well, and listen through and read it a couple of times. Like read it once where you just read it for reading it, right? And then you'll see whether or not you start getting the words. Okay, you see which words come up again and again and again and again. Listen to it and have it as something you listen to, and then read it again. And then when you read it for the third time, what you should do is look at those words that are sort of coming up again and again and again that you need to know or want to know, that you see, okay, this is clearly a very important word, or phrase or whatever. Highlight it in the book and look it up and make sure that you know it. And then later you can go back and sort of, you can do the exercises in the book themselves, or you can also look at like trying to translate it back, and you can play with it. You can try and use it in a different context. So use it in your writing, use it in your speaking when you're talking to somebody who speaks the language. And that's the way you really get to grips with the language, is using it and using vocabulary and grammar actively. Because if you don't do that, it's just theory in your head, or that piece of paper that you've written everything down on that you throw away at the end of your lesson. Hope that helps. What are the most exotic languages that I've dabbled in? Okay, necessarily learned to speak. Okay, not necessarily learned to speak. Okay, I have books for learning 100 different languages. Okay, the most exotic ones are being Cree, Aiwu, and Sidamo. Wow. Okay, that's a really cool thing. Okay, I've got books like that as well. I have Inuit from Canada. I got that when I was there. I've got books on Kyrgyz, which, I mean, it's not so unusual, Kyrgyz, but I suppose it's a lesser studied Turkic language by many people in the West. And then also Dothraki, which is the conlang. And then also I've got languages like Greenlandic, like Faroese. I've been studying Kristang. I've studied Ladino, which is, both Kristang and Ladino are very well worth learning, especially if you already speak Spanish or Portuguese, because you'll find it extremely rewarding. You'll be able to start using it quite quickly. And then also I've been studying Cornish, which I guess is quite unusual nowadays. It's not the sort of thing that you hear people studying all that often. And I've studied Maori for a time, and Mayan, and I'd love to study Nahuatl. But yeah, it's been a long road, and studying lots of different languages and having a lot of fun. And obviously this year is the year of the Manx language, so I've been studying a little bit of Manx just to get a little bit of words. Beg and Gaelg, a little bit of Manx. Yeah. Can you get fluency using memory palaces and cognates? Honestly, memory palaces are great. The only problem with memory palaces, you still have to go through them to find the words that you need, and sometimes it can take time. So if you're talking about writing, yeah, it could work really well. If you're talking about speaking, it could be a bit slow. Depends how much you're using them. Eventually they could become automatic. So, I mean, whether you've memorized them through a palace or through something else is by the by. It has to become automatic. I know there was a person from New Zealand who studied the French Scrabble dictionary and won in France, and didn't actually speak French, but he knew all of the words in the Scrabble dictionary because he had them in a memory palace. So it doesn't necessarily follow that a memory palace will make you really fluent, if that makes sense. Definitely an impressive skill to have, though, nonetheless. Cognates often help. They help if you think about what they mean in one language and what they don't mean in another, and vice versa. So yeah, that will help a lot. Anyway, unfortunately, I have to go. It's been an hour and I will get cut off on Instagram. But it was lovely to see you all. Thank you for coming. And please do stop by next week and we'll talk again. All the best. Happy language learning.